excuse me, the power of the creative artist. There are no coincidences. So I guess this was important to share this, put it up on the network. Some of the pop-ups that I get on my YouTube video, because it realizes I have an interest in certain things. And so when I go back in time, I realize I'm not living in now time. But that's okay, because I know how to manage that. And so I was thinking of the power of the creative artist. And of course, ever since I was a child, and my parents brought a black and white TV into the house, because this is a whole entire different subject, how programming works with signals intelligence, okay? Communication signals. So I realized when the black and white TV came in, I told my dad, listen, this thing's trying to program me, okay? Program my reality, okay? So what do we mean by that? So I thought, well, I always loved movies, okay? I grew up with all the you know, Hollieewood, silent films. You know, what's his name? The guy with the mustache. I can't even remember his name. And that's a good thing. I don't want to remember the last world that I came out of, right? Because we're moving into another one. Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin was a genius filmmaker, okay? He brought out everything and everybody, see? So he's what we call a captive artist, capturing your consciousness, okay? So I was just watching a video with Kirk Douglas, who was on the Johnny Carson show. I used to love Johnny Carson because he was very quick on his feet using this, right? So I used to love Kirk Douglas because he was a great actor, okay? He could play all kinds of parts, which means he was diversity. So they were talking about Jimmy Cagney, right? And I do remember Jimmy Cagney. I love Jimmy Cagney. So when Kirk Douglas was talking about his own son, of course, he's got his son, which is, I forget his son's first name, but he's another Douglas. He made a lot of good films in, what was it, the 70s and 80s. But anyway, he was talking about the character Jimmy Cagney played, particularly with his voice. Come and get me, coppers. You remember that? And so what draws your state of consciousness into the creative artist that's on the film, the projector, the movie, okay, is that Jimmy Cagney was a larger-than-life character. It was the power of his own creative expression, which means his state of consciousness in playing the part that he was to draw the audience, capture the consciousness of the audience into the character that he is thus expressing. Okay? He had the power to be able to do that through his own creative, artistic expression that is made manifest by the character he is expressing, that is drawing everybody in to his energy. The energy that is using the consciousness. He is the consciousness from which the energy that he's using to express the energy through his character, that is thus holding us, our consciousness, captive to the artist. Okay? So you were experiencing the artist. You were experiencing Jimmy Cagney. You're experiencing the power of his state of consciousness. Okay? The power of that artist, the creative artist. So that's why I took a class one time in college called, what was it called? Film. It was a fine arts class, but it had to do with breaking down the art of filmmaking. Okay? So why would I take a class like that? I'm not going into making films. Because the creative artist, and this goes back to something that I mentioned yesterday that I sort of forgot to hang my hat on, and that deals with Serenity. On page 444, third edition, Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, talks about the director of the play. Okay? So you have all the characters in the play, you have all the props, the landscape scene. Like when you go to watch a movie, all of that is prearranged. Nowadays, they can do it all digitally. They can pull up scenes from, say, another movie that was already created, so then they go out and pay the people to shoot it, set up the scenes. Hey, it's too windy today, we're going to shoot tomorrow. Or they can put up wind machines, etc. I spent a lot of time going through Universal Studios, seeing how they were doing all this. Part of the reason is not just to oh, this is very amusing. Believe it or not, this is a lot of how, when you're collecting data, and you're trying to put together, as I did from the time I was a child, how were they able to program everybody in order to sort of have their consciousness captured into the movie that they're producing instead of the one that you're producing? Well, you got to know how they did it. All right? Okay, so that's what I'm describing. So page 440 will talk about how the director, okay, your state of harmony, your state of peace, okay, when you think of a director in a play and the characters all of a sudden either forget their lines or they're not producing the consciousness through which they want to express, so that the director is experiencing the actor playing the part. If the director is not experiencing the way he wants the movie to be experienced by the audience, then the director is going to get upset. Okay? Why is that? Because the artist, the character, the actor or the actress, okay, has done something that's not in alignment with the consciousness of the director of the play. So the director's serenity is based on what? Making sure that all the characters, all the props, everybody that is in that movie has got to do their job according to exactly the way the director of the play is saying it's all got to come out. Because the serenity of that director is based on making sure that everybody else is doing what the director says you got to do. That means you obey the director, don't you? The director of the play. See? Otherwise, that director is going to get upset. That's called obey your master. That's how they invert it. Instead of being the director of your own play, being the artist and writer of your own story, they want you living in their stories. Okay? That way, your state of consciousness is captured by the director of their play. Okay? So I have fun with this sometimes because it's like saying, now I can choose. I can run on memory and experience your movie that is running on a slower clock. Okay? Or I can go into my creative imagination and start creating my own stories where the amount of energy that I'm using to do that with that is in that story is so powerful with so much fire. I'm not living in the past. I'm not living in the future. I'm experiencing what is in that story because it's moving so fast. That's why when you sit around a campfire and you realize, just tell me a story. We used to call those bullshit sessions. Are you bullshitting or are you telling me the truth? Well, the reality outside that we're experiencing might be what you believe is true, but in my mind, I'm living in another universe that's based on a higher frequency density consciousness. You think I'm bullshitting, but that's the universe I live in. What? Yeah, let me tell you the story of the places I've been. They're real to me because I created them. No kidding. Yeah. So they used to call that a bullshit session. So you're bullshitting. You're lying. No, I'm not. I really am experiencing this. The third eye is experiencing a completely different place. As a matter of fact, it's a book. I already wrote this story. It's already sitting on a shelf, okay? So that they call that science fiction or they call that fiction. It's not true. See how they invert things? So in other words, the reality that you live in that's holding your consciousness you believe is true, but the world you want to live in, which is the one you created, is not true. You see how that works? Now, if you put all of this together and all the videos that I've done, you begin to realize how people's state of consciousness is held captive to the director of the play. You're not writing your own movie anymore, are you? Nope. You're living in theirs. Well, that's okay. That's your free will to do that, okay? But what you find out when that happens, you're not autonomous anymore. You're held captive by somebody else's state of consciousness. That's not autonomous. When you're running at an extreme rate of speed where everyone is free to create and imagine and manifest what it is that they're choosing to experience, you're in a completely different realm than this one. See what I'm saying? You're living in your own world. The one you're creating. And you're sharing it with others who are doing the same thing with you. That's a hell of an art gallery, isn't it? Welcome to the higher heavenly realms. Okay? That's higher density consciousness. Even though I think of no density because I don't want to hold anything that's weight captive. I let everything go. I don't want to hold nothing captive. I don't want to hold nothing captive. Now I'm burning the fastest speed possible. Because I don't need to use any extra energy to do what? Carry any baggage that is attached to me. That's why I used to put up a schematic. It was actually a picture of a guy that's inside a house and he's looking out of a window. So if you can perceive this picture in your mind the way that I'm perceiving the picture that's in mine, I'm sharing with you, then you're inside of a house looking out of a window and you're looking out at a flower garden. And what you're seeing is, wow, I'm in a state of love. How beautiful those flowers are. That's called the ink blot test, the world in which your spirit, your soul is living in because you perceive the universe you live in through what love is and living spirit. You don't want to hold that flower captive. That flower is so beautiful in its own free state. You're observing the flower. You're observing the flower through what you are, which is what love is, which is what that flower is. You're a reflection of the energy of the love that you're giving to the flower that is coming back to you. So you don't want to attach that. You don't want to, oh, I want to hold you. I own you. That flower belongs to me. Well, doesn't the flower have a right to be in its own free state and for you to love it just the way that it is? Of course. So then you have another window that's next to it on the schematic that I put up on my Facebook page, okay, that shows the guy that's in the window that's feeling so much love for that flower as I just described. And then in the next window you see where the flower is held. Oh, it's attachment. It's attached. Now you're holding the consciousness of the awareness of the flower captive. You're my property. I own you. You're mine. This is when we get into, for example, in a previous video I talked about how when this girl wanted me to be a spiritual advisor and I realized that her 4-year-old daughter was already picking up habits from her mother because her mother was wanting to hold everything captive. So she knew this, so I said, you've got to let go. You got to let go of all the baggage and realize that doesn't serve you because you're holding yourself in lower frequency density consciousness. You're wanting to hold everything captive. You don't want anything to be free. You're putting everything in a cage just like they do our children, see? They put our children in cages, okay? They want to put everything in a cage, in a box, to hold it captive because it represents energy. So they're holding energy captive, aren't they? That's right. They're holding your energy captive. And that's because they don't know how to be in a free state of what love is and living spirit that will let everything be free to be what it is. That's the only way you're ever going to be able to experience everything in the cosmos in its beautiful free state, because you want to experience something as it naturally was created to be what that is to let it be what it is. Okay? And if you love what you are in a free state, that's easy to do because the energy that you're running on through which you're perceiving what it is what love is, because that's what you are. That's the bidirectional mirror, you see? And that's pretty simple. So I thought I'd share that through the way in which, for example, Hollieewood, because I broke down all their movies, and of course they changed over time. You know, it used to be in Hollywood, for example, they had very strict standards, okay, not only on their dress code, that was very much in fitting with society. So in other words, you could look at their movies and then look at American society, for example, and you would see a mirror image. That's the programming. That's the consciousness that is held captive in America to the movie makers, okay? And that's how they self-perpetuate the same capture of that consciousness to the Hollywood entertainment venue. Okay, even though I love movies, right? But there's a distinction when you know the difference between how that's perceived on different levels based on a clock speed and no clock, right? Right. I call that 2 live streams, okay? You can run theirs, which is running a slower clock, kick the accelerator in, now you're in no time. So you begin to realize you're managing your speeds, okay, between time zones, no time zones, okay, right? Which means that you can be in any dimension and observe and experience everything that's there through the perception of what love is and living spirit, which is why you can find us everywhere in the cosmos. Wherever love exists and living spirit, you'll find us. That's the beauty and the genius of the cosmos, that being connected with Source becomes one. You're essentially one with love. You are what that is. You're free to create and imagine whatever you want. And so the artist comes out. The musician comes out. What do you want to be? Whatever I want to be. Well, let's see. Throw you a box of crayons. Create something. See what you can do. Next thing, when you realize you have the freedom to do that, you're not held captive by anything. Okay? When children realize that, that's an enormous amount of learning. The child is learning through its own creative capacity, the power that it has to live in whatever reality it wants, because the one that it's creating with the mind that it's using it, and living spirit with its soul, is experiencing what it's creating. That's learning. And when the speed of the learning begins to realize that, that child is not going to want to be held captive anymore. It loves going at that speed, which is no time, which is what love is. That's a timeless state of being. So I thought, that's a creative artist in all of us, to have creativity, imagination. We're not held captive. That's something that says, hey, come on over here. Listen to me. You're going to live in my world. Well, what's your world about? Remember, I mentioned this, and I'll leave you with this. When I was a child, I thought, man, I landed on the wrong movie set. Where's Warner Brothers? Are they making a love movie so I can go jump into that? Which means the end of the story is always going to be a happy one. Because that's what love is. And they used to have a code that meant that the good guys always win. The white hats always win against the dark. They were not allowed to show that the dark ever won. I think the first movie I ever saw, as a matter of fact, where the perception of a bad guy, although he wasn't a bad guy because he was robbing the banks that were owned by the bad guys, was Steve McQueen, which was in that movie, as I remember, called Bullet. I believe it was Bullet. Or anyway, he was robbing the guys' bank. You think, wait a second, robbing a bank? That's against the law to do that. Well, it's like Robin Hood. We're robbing from the bad guys to give back to the poor, right? So you're not really a bad guy. But it was the first movie that I remember where Robin Hood, other than the old Robin Hoods with Errol Flynn, although Errol Flynn was a bad guy himself, you wouldn't know that unless you looked at the history of Errol Flynn. Okay, so you have to look at the relationship of who's who in these movies and their bloodline and all the rest of that. But the important thing is that the perception through which we experience what it is we are, and the relationship we have in a bidirectional mirror, what we experience in that mirror, which is the holographic universe, is what we choose it to be. That's the power of your consciousness and your living spirit, that you're not held captive by somebody else's consciousness. You're autonomous. And that's the beauty of the cosmos, is the perception through which you perceive it. That's why the ink blot test is given to children. That's an idea to see how you perceive the universe is through your own mind, spirit, and soul. Right? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Have a great day.